Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, so I'm back, and today we're going to be doing a watercolor landscape with some trees. And in particular, we're going to be doing a birch tree. But there's all kinds of leaves and things that are around it. And this is a typical scenario around here at this time of year. So let's get into it. This is my reference picture. It's featuring this birch tree. And we have all these leaves. This is actually a path, and I might want to edit this picture. I kind of don't want to have that man-made element in it, so I'm going to maybe change that to water. So I want to start, first of all, talking about my thinking process behind working in autumn landscape. There's a couple of problems that you run into with autumn landscapes. During summer or spring, you have, green trees on blue sky, and that's great. But in fall, you often get these yellows and golds and reds and things like that against the blue. Now, in watercolor, if you layer those on top of each other, that is going to produce a muddy color, because orange and blue being complements. So very often, you have to paint your trees first, paint your sky around it, or make your sky light enough that your colors won't be dulled down by putting them on top. All right, we don't have a lot of sky in here. We've only got a little bit up here in the corner, and I can maybe put a few more bits peeking through and that sort of thing. But typically, we'll do that background wash, and then we'll put the colors on top and everything else. But often in landscape, in fall, I'm going to be putting the foreground in first. And I know that sounds kind of backwards, but it allows me to think in terms of negative painting a little more easily, because I will be painting around things that need to stay nice and bright. So I'm going to just very quickly pencil in my trees. So I'm going to be working on Arches 140-pound, I'm working on 300-pound today. 300-pound cold press paper. I'm using a variety of artist quality paints. These ones are mostly Da Vinci. And my brushes are mainly squirrel hair brushes, and brands really don't matter that much. As long as you're using artist quality products, you should be okay. So this is 11 by 15. It's a quarter sheet. And I'm going to start by drawing in where I want to put my birch trees. Now, as I said, I'm going to edit this a little bit. It's not going to be exactly the same. I mean, it's obviously too much to make it exactly the same. So I'm just going to start off here. Now, this birch tree starts pretty close to this corner here. And this one. So in terms of the edges of my paper, this is how I keep things kind of sorted out. You can see I'm making little marks where the bottom of the tree is. So if I make marks in the same places here, my positioning of my tree and everything will come out pretty close to what I want. Now I'll come up to the top here, and I want to come Now, you obviously don't have to get that scientific about it, but this is something that I sort of mentally do as I'm working along. David's asking, is there any particular reason for 300-pound today? Yeah, I didn't stretch any of my 140-pound. So I'm working on 300-pound today. So I didn't get it done, and I can't do it right now because it would have to dry. All right, the bottom of my tree is going to come down around here somewhere, and let's go. Now, as I do my tree, I don't want to make it like a telephone pole. It's very important to capture the character of the tree, those subtle little changes in the trunk and things like that, because that's what makes it so much more interesting. So I find that almost doing kind of straighter lines and making sort of bends in it like that is much better than doing a perfect curve or something like that. Right. Okay, so this is a fork in the tree here, right about here. And this one's fairly straight, but it's got a little bend to it. Now I'm just putting in the tree trunk for now. All right, that's the positioning of my tree. I've got a whole bunch of leaves and other things going on over here, but right now I just want to make sure that I am saving the birch bark here so that I can do all of this stuff around it without worry of, getting over onto my birch tree. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to save it a little bit sort of unconventionally. Not unconventionally really, but rather than using masking fluid, I'm going to use masking tape. So I can see my pencil lines through my masking tape. I'm going to break it here because there's a bend in the tree. So I need to bend my tape. And rather than bending my tape and having wrinkles in it, I'm just going to cut a new piece there. Got to get this flat. This is not flat, so let me just flatten this out. So the tape acts as a wonderful resist for your watercolor, just about the same as your masking fluid. I really need a knife here just to make this a little easier. Now, another thing that I like to use sometimes, I'll use packing tape. Packing tape is clear. You can see through it really easily, and that works really well too. But I can see through this tape pretty well, and that's what I'm going to do. I can bend it a little bit. Just have to be really careful where there's little creases because the paint can get in where the little creases are. All right, let's make that go there. And I'll do the next one. And when I overlap, I'm trying not to overlap too much because when you overlap, you can't see the pencil lines. But as little overlapping as possible. I'm just about there. See, as I said, as little overlapping as possible. Whoops, I got a little hole there. I don't want that. And it's a tree. It's very organic, so if I don't get it exactly like the reference, it really isn't that big a deal. So if you are looking for this reference, you can go to my Facebook page where I've got the link for this video, and in the comment section I put the reference picture. All right, so I've got a bunch of tape on there, and now I want to remove what I don't need. So I'm going to use my knife and come along and cut out my tree. Remove that tape. And I know you're probably thinking, well, wow, doesn't that leave like a residue on your paper, and isn't that going to tear your paper? I've not had a problem with the Arches paper. If you're experiencing tearing with your paper, could be your paper quality. And if you're really concerned about your tape sticking and tearing your paper, you can always sort of put it on your jeans a couple of times before you do that. And as I'm cutting this, obviously I'm not cutting through the paper. I do this on 140 pound as well. You can feel the tape and when you've cut through, so you'll know when you do it, there's a feel to it, and you know you won't cut through. Okay. Now the big concern here is going to be getting the leaves and things that are in front of the tree here. So we'll have to draw a little bit of that on and probably cut out a little bit more. This is where it was double thick, so I have to cut a little harder, a little bit more, because there's 2 layers of tape right in that one spot. There we go. Pull that off. Yeah, if I can get a grip of it. There we go. Get a tape all over my hands here. All right. One thing to be sure of though, make sure that your blade is always extra sharp. It's not worth saving that little end piece. Just take the end off of your knife. Ha! I'm saying this and then I can't pull it off. There we go. And there's a little slot in here. There's a little slot in the end of these tools, and that's for snapping off your blade. So you put it in, you look for the angle, and you give it a little snap, and that will come off. And then you have a fresh new blade. Which already feels better. And it's a tree, so I mean, we don't need to have like perfect smooth lines, no rulers, no anything like that. I'm zoomed out again. I gotta zoom out again, sorry. I almost forgot that. Yes, tearing the edges of the tape does make it a great way to do that if you are scrubbing out or something like that. But I am trying to preserve the tree itself. If you are scrubbing out, you can take the tape and basically rip it down the middle. like this, and you get a really good tree, because you can take two pieces like this. Okay, I didn't do that very well, but you can put two pieces side by side and you get that. But you see, this is the reverse of what we're doing. So, but that's a really good thing that you brought up, because then you'll know how to sort of lift out an area like that, or to paint a darker tree in there or something like that. All right, so let's see here. I want to make sure I'm not missing any comments. This tape is a little thicker here because there's a couple of layers, so I have to cut that. And I wouldn't just rip this off like a Band-Aid. I would, you know, pull it carefully to make sure you haven't missed anything. Packing tape is probably my go-to that I usually use, just because you can see through it a lot better. I don't think it's as sticky as this masking tape is either. But I'm using masking tape just because I think that's probably what most of you have on hand. But as I said, just put it on your jeans a couple of times before you stick it to your paper. Okay, there's our tree, and we're going to have some leaves and things in front. So I'm going to draw a few leaves in front of the trunk. You see that there's, you know, a few leaves at the base of the tree, and I don't want it cut off, you know, like it's on concrete or something like that. I want it to have some shape. So I'm going to cut, or I'm going to draw rather. I'm going to draw and cut a couple of shapes here at the bottom, just to show some leaves, and to make sure that the bottom of the tree doesn't look like it's too phony. Okay, so I'll just cut around these shapes. There's a lot of ways of doing autumn landscapes, lots and lots of ways. This is merely one way. It's not the right way or the wrong way, it's just one way. So, I mean, I could actually probably do several versions of this same tree. Not liking this masking fluid as well as my packing tape for sure. Okay, I'm gonna do just one more here. There we go. Okay, so I've got a couple of leaves there. I could actually cut, you know, a couple of random leaves up in the tree trunk as well, if I want to. There are a few leaves that are in front. They will need to be more yellow and things like that. But I think because this tree trunk is white, I think I can just put it on top. I don't really need to cut it out for that type of thing. The only reason I did this is so that I could put the autumn leaves in the front. So let's talk about some colors now. So you can see this is my tree, and I'm going to look at colors now. So grab some brushes. Let's grab this is a number 2 squirrel hair brush. It's the numbers don't mean that much because of course they are different from company to company. Now, but what I would recommend here is that if we're going to do a lot of wet stuff, that we're going to be using brighter colors than what we want to end up with. And I say that because it is really easy to dull down a color, but it is really pretty much impossible to get it back. So go brighter than you want. You can always tone it down. That would be my advice about your leaves and stuff. So I'm going to go with some bright colors like gamboge, quinacridone gold, I'm going to use maybe some rose d'or, a reddish orange, or an orangey red, I should say. And I'll probably end up using some of this burnt sienna as well. And maybe even a little bit of some crimson, right? So we got lots of different variations of color here that I can dip into and add that on. So what I want to do is create the brighter leaves that are in the picture. All right, that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start with these yellowy ones down here. Then I'm going to get up into some of these. There's yellows and oranges and almost bordering on red in some of these cases, but I want to have some good variety in there. And I'm using a fairly good sized brush here because I really don't want it to get too overworked and picky. Like really, how do you not get dark lines where I cut? Because I'm not painting over them again. It's just sort of what a light color meets a dark color, and then it's fine. But if you make a cut, like if I were to take my knife and make a cut right here, that would show. And then I'm painting over top of it, that would show. But in this case, it won't show because that's just the edge of the tree. All right, so let's start. Yellows. And I'm just going to be working right into my paper here, just dabbling all kinds of this. And this is fairly wet color that I'm using because I want to drop in other colors while this is still wet. All right, let's get in some Quin Golds in here, back in here, in between. So I'm going not in the yellow, I'm going around the yellows. There's even a little hint of green in some of these leaves. I'm going to go with a little bit of sort of reddish color in here. Reds have a tendency to dry a lot duller than what they look like when they're wet. And that's one of the other reasons that I'm suggesting don't really go too dull with your colors, because they will dull themselves as they dry a little bit. So I'm rinsing, going back to some of my golds here. And there's like little bits of white and things like that in there. I am not at all concerned about that. I'm just getting some nice colors in here. Maybe a little of that crimson. And I'm going to take some of that burnt sienna as we come over here into the drier leaves. I'm going to go more burnt sienna. And nothing has a line around it right now. Like, you know, I'm just kind of modeling in all these colors. I don't want to get overly fussy about this. And that's the problem when you're looking at like a fall scene. You see all this complexity and all of this stuff. Think about the overall impression that you get of an area before you start getting into fiddly little details. Let me see. I gotta scroll back here. I see a couple of questions. If we have trouble with values in leaves, do you recommend printing a black and white version? It certainly would not hurt to have a black and white version. But I mean, I think you can tell that, you know, this leaf is lighter than what's beside it. But right now we're not really too worried about the values. Other than, you know, I'm using sort of diluted color. I do see a little hint of green in some of these. So where the yellows are, I'm going to put a little green. And I just splashed here, so I'm just going to grab that. And just a hint of some greens in here. And it's just a little bit, this is one called leaf green, but you can just mix a little blue and yellow together and make a green. How do I not answer that one? Do you use high adhesive tape or a special brand? The brand of tape that I'm using is 3M. It's actually it's the stickiest one. Painter's tape would probably be better on this. I feel like this, and it's partly because I'm working on 300 pound. I usually work on 140 pound. You know, so the surface texture on the 300 pound is a little softer, and therefore it sort of picks up the fuzz from the paper. And let's see, I was doing burnt sienna, and if I get lines in there, great. I actually want to create the look of some leaves anyway. So don't worry if you don't have a smooth wash. It's really not what you're after anyway. So coming in here, and we're going to start coming up into this right hand side. I absolutely love these colors here next to this birch tree. I think that's really nice. I don't think these are well, some of this is birch leaves. These ones are birch leaves. These ones here, I don't know if those are birch. I don't think they are. But so you get the yellow and the golds and the different colors, because every tree makes or turns a different color when fall comes. All right, so I want to make sure I've got lots of this yellow. I'm going to move my reference out of the way. You can see the one on the screen, and I'm going to work in between here and not worry about getting lines or anything like that. But you see, I'm just kind of using calligraphy. I'm kind of holding the brush on the end, and I'm not trying to fuss with it too much. I think if you are using the tape for the first time, I would suggest that you try something small, test it out. Test out your paper, test out your tape, test out your knife, make sure that everything works the way you want. I don't want you spoiling a big piece of paper only to find out, oh, my knife was dull, or my tape was too sticky and it tore the paper, or something like that. I want you to test it out. And I'm going to start switching up some of the color here, letting some of those nice oranges and burgundies get in there. Maybe I'll use a little permanent rose even. That's nice. Mixes with the yellow and gives me a nice fresh looking and you see, there's like all the little bits and pieces in between and things like that. And I'll probably paint around a lot of that later on, but I need to put what's in the foreground first so I know what it is I'm painting around. It's really hard to paint around something that isn't there yet. So I put the foreground leaves in first in order to create the positive, and then we will paint the negative. I think one of the things that a lot of people have difficulty with the negative painting is that they're painting around something that doesn't exist yet. Once something's there, it's quite easy because you can see what it is you're painting around. So if I say to you, okay, draw an apple, now paint the background first, you're negative painting. And it's easy because you've drawn the apple. But because this is so complex, like there's so much, so many leaves and things like that, we have to figure out a way to simplify this a little bit. So I'm sort of dancing back and forth between all of these colors, quinacridone gold and reds and things like that. Dancing back and forth so that I get all these variations. I'm also looking at sort of the way that the branch comes in from the right hand side. I'm not just making polka dots. Keep switching up your color and put it in as you're going so that the colors sort of mix and mingle. And that way you get some really nice variations. We'll see what happens here. I haven't painted this one, so we'll see how it turns out. Now the darks that are going in behind, sure, I could easily just put a wash in here and then put that over top. Sure, I could, but I'm going to leave some of these gaps because there's a little bit of something I want to talk about when I go to put those colors in the background. So I have a reason for doing it this way. Okay, so we've got trying to emulate at least sort of the way the leaves are hanging down. Well, some of them are hanging down, some of them are pointing up, but how do I not cut the paper? I am not cutting the paper because I'm not using crazy pressure. Kind of going all over here, putting in a few sparse leaves in, some of the branches that have lost almost all of their leaves. There's just a few hanging on. But you have to resist the urge to make everything evenly spaced and the same size. So you need to cluster some of them. Right? Make a cluster. Make a couple of little ones here and there. Don't go overboard. Even then, I kind of spaced everything. It's just the way we're wired that we do that. I'm just checking to see if I'm caught up on questions. Looks like logs on fire. Yeah, it does kind of. Okay, I don't think I missed any questions, but if I didn't mention it at the beginning, if you have a question, put it in capitals. It's just a lot easier for me to spot because I don't have somebody else monitoring. I have to kind of glance up as I'm painting. So it will help if you can put it in capitals if you have a question. kind of a lot coming in here from the right hand side, and I like that. And I'll probably do some defining, a little bit of defining within these branches on the right as well. But for now, I like that crimson in there once in a while too. Even though I don't really see a lot of, there's nothing in here that really looks crimson, but there's this bright orange, and that will help to create some of that bright orange. Now, make sure you have enough. And then there's this, like that area that I want to have as the water. I think it's a path in the photograph. You know, this was a path, but I'm going to turn that, I think, into water. So I'm going to come back to the background here, and I'm going to start just maybe using some more browns and things. I don't want to use as bright colors in my background as what I have as in my foreground, but I'm going to go a little darker, and I'm going to go around some of these things here just to get started in this, or just so I can sort of earmark where this water will be. And I'll just dabble so that I can do the rest of that later. I just really wanted to mark where the water is going to be, so I remember to put it in, and so that I have an idea how it's going to look before I do this. Okay. Just has to be light. I don't need to do a lot of dark there. And I'm just going to make that circle that just kind of come to the end, like we're at a lake that has a little cove or something. My painting, I get to do what I want. So we'll make that come around. Maybe put a few more leaves in there. So you can see where I've kind of identified where my water is going to be, but I have a lot more work to do there. Make sure it all lines up. I didn't have it very straight there. All right, so we have some color established here. This is looking a little bit too yellow. I'm going to drop a bit more color in here. Maybe a few more leaves up in here. This area is going to be actually pretty dense with color, so I don't mind coming in a couple of times just to make sure that I've got lots of area covered. And you really don't need, it's so complex, you don't really need to worry about fussing to make it look like leaves. You just need the general feeling of what's there. And this is all still kind of melting together because it's still pretty wet. And so one thing about 300 pound is it does take longer to dry. It's not a quick drying paper because of the thickness and the absorbency, and I don't think I want that much of a gap there. It's really convenient, but it does also have different characteristics than your standard 140 pound. It is more absorbent. It tends to have a softer texture, as I mentioned, and so the paint actually feels different when you're painting on here. Just going to do a few more little dabbles up in here. A couple of little ones. I know it seems kind of weird to do these things in the foreground, but if I tried to put down all that dark background and put it on top, it wouldn't work. So yeah, I'm just reading through some of the comments. Yeah, I think Jay Alvis says that there may be a different species of tree to the right of the birch, and I think that's the case. That's why we have so much of this sort of golden color on the right, as opposed to the, like birches tend to go quite yellow, their leaves. Okay, so there's kind of a gap in here. We're seeing some trees through here and not a lot of color. Not a lot of color over here other than the odd little leaf and that sort of thing. Okay, so I'm leaving a few gaps in order to be able to put in some other trees, but I'm going to go with some blue now. Now we're using some complementary color, right? So I need to dry this, and because otherwise if I put this in and it starts bleeding with the complementary color, it is going to go really muddy. So I'm going to dry this. Blot off my tape because the paint sitting on the tape is going to take longer to dry because it's not on an absorbent surface. It just kind of sits there on top. So I've got bleeding and blossoms, and it's a little bit of a dog's breakfast right now, but it will make more sense as I go along. Now there's something that you're going to notice in pretty much any landscape where you have a lot of foliage is the laciness of the trees. You know, you see, it's not just solid leaves. You see lots of gaps in between, especially in the autumn when a lot of the leaves have fallen, and you get these sort of sparse bits of color. All right. Bee paper. Renee says she likes bee paper. I don't know what bee paper is. I don't know that I've ever heard that. Yeah, but in any case, yeah, there's a couple of different kind of trees here, which in a forested area you're going to get. You probably wouldn't get it in your yard. You know, we try to keep our maples and our birches apart from each other and things like that. But it's just the way we design our yards. You know, we like to organize everything. So, but in nature, it's anybody's guess. You get all kinds of stuff. All right, so I'm thinking this through for a second. There are some dark saplings that are coming up. They're much darker than this water. They'll cover anything I put over top to make those saplings. It'll be fine. And on this light background, no problem. So I don't need to worry about that. But I do have some leaves and things, which are orange, complementary color. I have some of those here. So I have to paint in between those if I want to create the look of bright color in those. If I go over it, it's game over. It will be very dark, dirty looking, and that sort of thing. So this is a pain, but we are going to paint around stuff with this light color. And this is one of the things that I find, really tricky in doing fall landscapes. If you're doing them not as loose as, like, some artists will go very, very loose with their landscapes, and they might even select a subject that will help them avoid this exact problem. So, but I think that sometimes when you see those complements side by side, It looks lovely. I mean, I think that the complements side by side absolutely sing. So, but it won't sing if those colors dull each other. So side by side, they're great. Layered on top of each other, not so great. All right, so I've gone around those things. Fill in some of those little gaps. And here I'm going to fill in some of these gaps too. Same blue. That one looks a little lighter there. I have to just remember everything dries lighter than what it looks like when it's wet. You might want to switch to a smaller brush when you're working in some of these, but I caution, don't go too small because you'll end up with brush marks in here and you're trying to make it look smooth. So fill a brush up, but make sure it has a good point so that you can tuck into these. Now I'm really kind of using the point of my brush, but my brush is full, like the belly part. See how fat this belly is here? It holds lots of paint, and I'm just using it, you know, kind of like the nib of a pen, and it just gravity feeds the paint down to the point as I paint. And so that's how I'm working here. You may get, like obviously you don't want to leave any little white gaps around things, but if they happen, don't be too concerned about it. Or if you overlap. If you overlap, that's an easy problem to solve. But at the end, when things are dry. All right, so I'm tucking in, making this. I know it's a nuisance, this negative painting, and even though we're negative painting, it doesn't feel like we're negative painting because the leaves are already there. So if you want to make your life a little easier in terms of negative painting, paint the thing you're painting around first, if you can. You can't in every case, you know, if you were leaving it white or something, or draw it out first. You know, draw out your leaves and paint those areas. But you still have to paint them separate, no matter what you do. I'm using cobalt in this case. I know that skies are usually more of a cerulean blue, but because this is a reflection, I'm going to make it more cobalt. Reflections are often darker. Often, I say, not always, but often darker. Well, that is that the lights are darker, the darks are lighter in reflections. It's kind of weird, isn't it? But it's kind of like everything gets a little bit less contrasty, maybe, in the water. I don't want to say that because that's a little confusing. But if you have something really white, it doesn't reflect really white in the water. Like, you know, if you had a really white house, it'll end up probably a little slightly gray. If you had a really black, say, log in the water, it would probably be a little lighter than the actual log. So darks reflect lighter, and the darks reflect lighter and lights reflect darker, so they flip. And most of the middle values, they'll end up about the same, maybe a little darker. Okay, little holes like that have to get filled in. Okay, I think that that's probably okay. Now there's one problem I think that I have right here, and that is if it's water, there will be reflection. So I'm going to have to put some reflection of the trees in here, but I'll be putting it on blue. And that'll be okay because, as I said, the reflection's going to end up darker. Did I decal the edges of the paper myself? No, I didn't. The decal edge of this paper was just the paper itself. That's the way it is. You can get they make decal edge rulers that you can use for tearing. That's kind of a convenient way of doing it. But you can also just sort of like dampen a line, put a ruler on it and pull it up against itself, like pull it up this way, like tight, holding your ruler down really tight and pull it up this way, and it will sort of tear the fibers and give you a little bit of a decal edge as well. That's one way to do it. There's a number of ways to do it. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to carry on here. I want to put in some of this background now. Now, when I look at this, it is gray. It is really gray. And you know, and in the fall and in the winter, there's so much gray. You know, it's a long period of time, and those bare trees just look very gray. So I want to incorporate a little bit more color, but mainly what I want to do is just make a cool color. So we are creating some cool to enhance the brilliant colors of the fall. I mean, that's what helps make it look really, really intense. The water is typically darker than the sky unless it is a real dark, and then it's lighter. How about that? Okay, water's darker except for something, you know, if it's a really dark area, it might reflect a little bit more. And I guess that happens because in a water surface, you're going to have more sort of ambient light, and it tends to collect some of that ambient light and lighten what's in the water. But if it's a like a cave or something like that, you can't. There's no ambient light getting into the cave. So what the actual cave itself is dark. But what hits the water gets a little bit of that sort of sky and everything else in there, so it ends up lighter. But everything else tends to be a little bit darker because you see the color of the water more. Like you see the actual, you know, lakes are typically not crystal clear. But, you know, so that you'll see like sort of the bottom, especially if it's a shoreline, you're going to see a little bit of the bottom and that sort of thing. All right, so I actually could leave this as a path. Like, I mean, the path could be just in a different direction. It's not bad. But I'm going to think about putting this in as a cool. Now, if I could put a cool color in there, I could maybe incorporate, well, I could put some blue in it. I could put some gray in it, but I think I'd like to make it even some purples maybe. So if I mix, if I take that alizarin crimson, I mix it with my cobalt blue, I can make some purples. Oop, don't want to make it a red purple, I want to make it a blue purple. And if I make a blue purple instead of gray, it's going to be a lot more lively in my painting. So in a photograph, it looks very gray. But that doesn't mean that's what you have to paint. You can always paint something a little bit more more lively than that. So I'm using some of my cobalt, my permanent alizarin crimson, and I'm going to do my background in something more lively than just my gray that I have. And it's going to be darker. It's a darker value than what the leaves are. You know, of course, when you have bright colors, lighter values, they will tend to come forward. And when you paint darker, duller colors, they will recede. They will go back in the planes of, you know, foreground, midground, background. It'll go more to the background. But once again, I'm using a really full brush and I'm painting around stuff here. You could actually, you know, if you wanted to make it an easier process. I'm not going to say it's really easier. It's probably easier for applying the paint, but it's not going to really save you any time. And that is, you could take masking fluid and mask off your leaves. But I'm going to paint around them because as long as I keep this wet, I can. And it doesn't even have to be that even. You can see I can put quite a bit of color in there. Now that color is like, look at it, how it vibrates with these oranges and stuff. Like, I could put in gray and it would look okay, but it would probably look a lot like the photo. And if I want to make something a little more interesting in my painting, I'm going to put something in there that's a little juicier. So would have made more sense for me to start at the top. I always do that. I don't know why. It is kind of my thing, I guess. And I started in the middle instead of the left side, which is what a right-handed person should do, is start on the left-hand side. I think lefties are more conscious of those things, so they tend to be smarter about it, I guess. But so I am negative painting around all of this, and it's a little tedious, but I don't mind doing it. For me, it's kind of enjoyable. And the key here, though, if you're filling in an area, keep the puddle wet. If you let it dry, then that's where your brush marks are going to come in. Fill up your brush. Paint with the tip when you're getting into the tight spots, but keep all of this wet. You see how I can swirl my brush around in there and nothing happens? That's why I'm not getting blossoms, because it's really wet. Because a lot of people ask me, oh, how do you do that without getting blossoms? It's because I'm keeping it wet. The minute it starts to dry, then you're in trouble. And if it happens, well, I would just embrace it and somehow fit it into your painting. When you have hard lines. Like I've got a couple of hard lines down here and that sort of thing now. I've got leaves and stuff, so that's certainly not anything I need to correct or anything like that. But ideally, just learn to fill up your brush and paint with the tip if you're trying to get. And if you have to stop, let's say I stop right there. That's kind of like those two leaves are really close together. I could that would be a good place for me to stop, but I could still keep that wet and keep going, even though I'm kind of working over here into this little corner. Now I have to look and see what's going on here. Maybe I want to switch this up, and it seems to be a little bit more sort of reddish color up in here. So I'm going to put some reds in here. I might even put in the suggestion of some greenery, like an evergreen or a deciduous tree. Let's put some of that in here just so it sort of ties those two together. You can't just suddenly change the color on the other side of a leaf. That doesn't make any sense. I like that. I'm going to put some of that down here too. I mean, do your best to work around some of these things. Don't agonize over it. Now we're getting up into an area where we're going to have a little bit of blue sky. So I'm just going to leave a few gaps, I think, and then I'll put the blue sky in after. Pardon me. I'm going to leave a couple of little holes, just a couple of gaps where I can put in some blue sky. And it doesn't, what I do does not need to match what the photo is. I have the general idea. I've got the placement of the birch tree. I've got the main colors, all of that. So I really don't need to make this just like the photo. But I do think that it would be interesting to get a few. Actually, don't see a lot of green in here. I think that's just dark shadow, but I could put some greens in here, but I'm just going to keep going with this. Maybe leave another couple of blue patches in this section here. Once this is in, it's kind of like, whew, you know, a lot of this gets, you know, the details are much easier to put in. Just getting rid of that white paper is a big part of this. So I'm going to do this section over here, and this should be the same as the other side. Don't go changing the color radically on the other side of the tree, because that would be very weird. Leave a gap or two in the sky, just a couple of sky holes on purpose. And switch it up, you know, sometimes a little more reddish blue, sometimes a little bit more deeper blue, purple. All right, I'm going to turn this because it'll be a lot easier for me to paint around all this little stuff if I do. So this is basically the bright colors in my painting. That's what goes down first. If you want to maintain the brightness in your fall landscape, keep your colors, your warms and cools separate, and don't get your colors too dull yet. Dull's easy to add. It's the keeping it bright that's the tough part. Not tough, you just have to remember to do it. Like, you just have to know the process. So keeping my colors consistent with the other side as much as possible. There's really very little that is green in this painting, or photograph, I should say. Yeah, it's pretty much all autumn, all just rich color. So as I'm working my way across, once again I'm going right to left, which is silly, but as I'm working my way across, I have to keep this little part here, I have to keep that wet. So I just take my wet brush and just touch it in there. And that's going to keep that wet until I get around some of this other stuff over here. So once all of this color is in here, then it's playtime. Then we get to really start putting things together. There's a couple of little white bits in there. Just fill those in. Keep this wet. Don't forget, keep that wet. You're babysitting a couple of busy kids here, and that's everywhere where your paint has to continue paint going is where you need to keep it wet. touch it again. These colors are separating a little bit on their own. I'm getting a little bit of granulation. And for the background, that's actually fine. I don't mind that one bit. And because this color is a lot darker, I mean, I'm going around these bright oranges and things. But if I don't get the shape perfect, I mean, it doesn't matter really. But it does get pretty dark up in here. Okay, so now I can continue. I'm going to turn it right upside down here because then that'll make sense. And you see I can connect those right where I left off. There's no hard line. It's because I kept it wet. That's the big secret. Just keep it wet. I was away with a group on the weekend, a painting group, and actually that's where I took this photograph. And it's a group in Ontario, and they organize these sort of art retreats, weekends throughout the year, and it was great because we were able to, you know, take hikes and paint all weekend, talk art all weekend. It was a lot of fun. And if you don't belong to an art group, I highly recommend it. And if you do join an art group, see if you can take part in it. What I mean by that is, you know, all these art groups, I'm hearing so many people saying that they can't get people to volunteer. It's like, volunteer. It's your group. You get to, they do all these wonderful things, and you can help out. You get more out of it than you're actually putting into it. Put it that way, because you get all this experience, you know, organizing things, and you get the inside track. You get to make choices about things. You know, where you go and what you do, and you know, you get the more of a say in things if you're volunteering, right? When I first started out, how much did I sell my paintings for? Well, I don't know. When I was 12, I probably sold my painting for $10. No, I would say when I started entering shows. Okay, when I started entering shows, I was probably one this size I might sell for 150 or something like that. I didn't feel that my ability was up to par, and I didn't really have a lot. Like, it's not like I had been entering a lot of competitions or anything like that. I didn't have a lot of awards under my belt at that point. And so the more you show, the more sort of awards you receive, the more sort of recognition you get, and you know, recognition by your peers. So people with experience, you know, because jurors for competitions are typically you know, art gallery owners or professional artists who have been painting for a long time. So if they deem your work well and good enough to receive an award or something like that, that is something that you can use to start leveraging your pricing and start increasing your prices. Once you maintain you know, a constant style, a constant sort of sales record or award, you receive several awards and things like that, then that is recognition by your peers, and you can start to increase your prices a little bit. Don't increase like double. That's crazy. You have to keep in mind that as you grow, I mean, everybody who starts painting relies on family and friends, and thank goodness for that, because how would we ever get anywhere without family and friends? And so you need help. Groups you belong to, things like that, all sort of help elevate your career and encourage you. And being with a group will also help to expose you to opportunities. I didn't know until I joined a group how many opportunities were available for showing my work. So joining a group is it's very valuable, really. You can find out about a lot of competitions and shows and events, like the weekend I just went on, and things like that. Is a slanted board the reason to keep the edges wet? Yes, it is, actually. A lot of people will do that. But I'm working flat, mostly for my camera. But yes, absolutely. If you keep your board elevated, the drips always sort of gravity pulls the wetness down. And so that edge, if you work top to bottom, will always stay wet. Now I've got to leave some, talking away here and almost forgetting, I've got to leave some sky here, so that's the upper corner, so I'm going to leave some sky there. Mine's a little different because I wasn't really watching it, but I'm going to come over here. Now there's not as much over here, okay, so I've got most of the big areas done, and I can come over here to the smaller area. And as I said, this is being a darker color, this can go around a lot of that. I'm probably going to end up using little bits of white in my finished painting in this case. I don't usually like using white that much, but occasionally it's got a good purpose, and for putting a little highlight on a branch or something, that would be something that I would use that for. That looks a little too square. I'll mess it up a bit. So I think that gives me sort of that dark value in the background, but it is not as gray. So I love you just have to know that complementary colors are going to sing next to each other. And so if you substitute a gray and put a color in instead, your painting's going to be a little more lively than your photograph. Matching everything in your photograph tends to look a little dull. The one thing I find about cameras is that, especially in the dark areas, they get so dull. They often lose a lot of detail too when your photographs. I know several artists who will take a reference picture and they will take it at one exposure, and then they'll increase it or decrease it in order to get highlights and shadows. So they have a reference for both so that they can include it in their painting. But color definitely brings more life into it. You can see those colors separating. Look at this sort of burgundy and all that going on there. Nice full brush, keep picking up that paint. And I've said it before, but remember, as you're painting, don't put down a nice full brush load of paint and then start spreading it all over the place. If you spread it out too far, then it's not going to be wet anymore. And then a lot of these little bits, they'll hopefully go quickly. This is kind of slow, this process, but if I were to mask off all of these leaves, that would have been equally slow. So at least this way I can just go directly to the next phase. One thing to keep in mind too, if you do put masking fluid on top of your color, it will lift a little of your color. So whatever you put down is going to end up lighter. Like if I were to put masking fluid on this orange, it would end up lighter by the time I remove the masking fluid. Just messing up my wash here a little bit just to make it a little bit less uniform. There, put in a little bit of variation there. Okay, so I am going to switch to a smaller brush for a lot of these smaller areas just because they are small. So a little bit smaller brush. It's still a squirrel hair, round. And it's just fill in time. Don't have to worry so much about keeping edges wet and things like that. It's just these bigger sections you need to really keep that wet in order to keep that flowing, right? So we don't get a lot of brush marks and things like that. Now, a couple of hard lines in there it is not the end of the world because, of course, it is kind of a busy thing. But if the brush marks happen to be obvious and not going in the right direction, like these are a lot of vertical trees and things like that, so I wouldn't want to have a lot of horizontal or diagonal lines that would look really odd. It's nice to have, like this kind of negative painting is so easy because the leaves are there. Much harder, especially these gaps between leaves. I find that if people try to put them in, they end up kind of rounded. They're not as sort of geometric looking, which is usually what happens between leaves. You're going to get this sort of geometric shape. Oh boy, look at the time. I think this is going to be a 2-weeker. But I'm going to get to the point where I can take that this off so that I can, because I don't want to leave it on there a week anyway. I want to be able to take that off. This is a little slow and tedious, as I said, but for me, I like the actual just sitting here doing this. This is kind of meditative almost, just being able to sit and paint in these little spaces. It would drive other artists would drive them crazy, but I don't mind this one bit. I'm filling in all the white gaps, and the reason I like filling, like why I do them separate, is because if I put this purple over top of that orange, it would be a completely different color than what's over here, and it wouldn't look like the background. So it needs to be done separately, even though it's more work. And hopefully you could see that it does look like those are gaps and that it is the continuous background. I see dark spots in the last section. Is it, or just drying slower? No, I actually dotted in some stuff there. I wanted to put some variations in, so that was intentional. They didn't soften quite as much as I wanted them to, but I can, it's not a deal breaker. I can come in and incorporate that. Okay, I want to get these ones along here done first, or done next, so that I can get that tape off. Hopefully this tape isn't too sticky. I hope it won't tear. I didn't do what I advised, which was test it first. I really was running kind of a little late today, but okay, so I'll just fill the last of these in before I take the tape off, and we'll have to sort of do part 2 next week, I guess. But normally, like I could really finish this background before taking the tape off. I just don't want to leave it all week. So I'm going to take it off. Once the main washes, the wet stuff's in there anyway, I can work quite easily around those shapes that I see. There's going to be some real darks that I'll end up coming in to add and things like that. So even these little tiny bits there. It's like lace, right? We're painting lace, basically. We're painting the holes in the lace. Lace is probably a little easier because typically lace is white. And although you wouldn't leave it completely white because it has shadows and things too, but it's a much lighter color. We're not talking about complementary colors side by side. If you look at some of my watercolors and you say, oh, the colors are so clean. How do you get the colors so clean? This is how I'm doing it. It's just keeping complementary colors apart from each other. Soon as they mix, and there's many occasions where mixing them looks great because that's what you want. But if you're really trying to keep bright, brilliant fall foliage, which, I mean, that's the best part of fall, right? Then you kind of need to keep them separate, and it is a little bit of a nuisance, but it does work very well. Block printing at this stage. Yeah, it kind of does, doesn't it? Yeah, a little bit. A little more variation in it, perhaps, but a little bit like block printing. Isn't the... Oh, isn't... Okay. Isn't the glue of the tape going to interfere with the painting of the tree? I've never run into a situation where there's been enough residue left by tape to affect the painting process. So I would say no, it's going to be fine. Let's hope. Let's hope anyway. Before you leave, could you please show the photo large again? I will. Just try not to put it on top of my wet color. Probably don't need to worry about the edges here too much. That'll get cropped off. I could paint right all the way to the edge of the decal here, I suppose, but I will just leave it. So I noticed several of you posted your haunted forest that I did last week on my Facebook page. Thank you very much for sharing that. You know, so often I'm doing these and I don't get to see what you do. So that was a lot of fun for me to see the variations in that demonstration last week. That was fun. I would have liked to have included all of the suggestions for what to put in my haunted forest, but I thought it'd be a little too much and a little too long for me to do that. So might have to do like a different version sometime. But I liked all the moonlight and the mistiness of the forest. They all looked great. Almost there, just a few more bits to do. At last. Okay, I think I got all of it. I'm going to use a little bit of cobalt and cerulean just to paint in a few sky holes here. I think I'd like a little more cerulean than that and a little bit more diluted. Blot it to keep it light. Am I on screen? I want to make sure I'm on screen. Okay, I got some on my orange, and instantly I could see it was not a good color. So you still have to paint around those warm colors with your cool colors. Just going to turn it this way so I can get a little closer to it. All right, so I'm going to dry this, and then I'm going to take off that tape. Making sure I got all those little bits. Don't have to make sure everything is dry, just dry enough so I can take off that masking tape. All right, fingers crossed, folks. And I'm not pulling it straight up. That's usually kind of a dangerous way to pull off your masking tape. Pull it off away. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I'm not pulling off the edges of the paper, but I'm just pulling it slowly and against it, like I'm laying it down, like folding it over basically. You can see a little fuzz coming off there. That's this 300 pound. Now, like I said, you can take and put your tape on your jeans a couple of times just to make sure that it's not overly sticky. Or use painter's tape, which is less adhesive, and it will lift a little more easily than this one. This one's the stickiest of all of them. This is the old-fashioned contractor's grade masking tape. I think it's 2020. It's the number on the thing. It's 3M. Look how nice and clean that is, though. So as you're cutting this tape, don't cut and recut. Make one cut. That's your commitment. Don't recut, because as we mentioned, you have cuts on your paper. The cuts will automatically go dark as you paint over them. Oh, didn't get the corner here. Pull slow and careful. You don't want to be... Imagine doing all that work and then all of a sudden you pull the tape off and it makes a rip. That's why you go slow and careful. Okay, so it looks like we're in good shape. And you can see that it looks like the leaves are in front and they're nice and they're nice and clean. They don't have any weird shapes in them or anything like that. and this is the image. So it doesn't look anything like it yet, and you've got to get used to that stage of your painting when it doesn't look like it's supposed to. We're also, this is going to be obviously more painterly looking than the reference picture. So yes, Linda's saying use a hairdryer on the low setting to loosen the tape without pulling up the fuzz or tipping. Yes, so warming up the masking tape will also make it easier to release. I had just dried it, so mine was a little bit warm anyway, and so it feels pretty good. Doesn't feel like there's anything sticky there, that's for sure. And I can't really do any more today because it's going to be an extremely long video if I did that. So we'll finish this one up next week. Oh, I do have one more question. Ever use wax, and when? Yeah, I have used wax. I don't use it too often. I'll use it for things like sparkle on water. Only an area, you only use a wax resist on an area that you never intend to paint again. You just want to keep the white of the paper. That's the only case. The thing about the wax is it will give you it'll give you that stipply look because it catches the uppermost textures on your paper only. It doesn't get down into the little grooves. So just keep in mind that if you use a wax candle or a wax crayon or something like that in your painting, that it's going to leave that. But anyway, there's no question there's fresh color here. We're going to dull things down a little bit next week and start to assemble this painting. So, all right, take care, everybody. Happy Halloween, and we'll see you next week for the conclusion of this one. All right, take care. Bye.